All right, guys. Welcome to another week of digital learning. We're going to be doing our poetry unit this week. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to be posting videos where I'm going to go through the presentations. Now, you are more than welcome to the presentation on your own, but in the videos, I'm going to be offering nations of the poems that we're going to be encountering. So what we're going to notice is we're going to be reading poems each day. The same book. It's called Many Storied House by George Lyon, a Kentucky author. And then you guys are going to be next week on Tuesday through Friday doing a poetry project where you're going to take her poetry collection and you are going to write about a place that is sort of like your house where you live. Now, you've probably been spending a lot of time there lately, so you might have some new inspiration for that. So today we're going to talk about this week. So notice poetry recitation assignment. Some of you are going to groan about this, but I always have my students I try to always have my students memorize some literature. This is not a long poem. It's 60 words even. Or actually, I think it's 51 words. So what you're going to be doing is you got to join the Flipgrid and you'll be posting it on there. You're going to record yourself reciting this from memory. Now, usually in class, this would be done like with me in the hallway, but we can't do that. So we're going to do Flipgrid. So you're going to memorize it. You're going to look directly into the camera. That way I know that you're not cheating. And you're going to recite it from memory. So that's one of your tasks this week is to memorize this poem. And you can see it's worth 60 points. Should be 60 easy points for you. And that is going to be due Friday, April 17th at midnight. Should be 60 easy formative points. You have vocab this week that you're going to be working on. It's week 9, so you'll be going through that. And words are on there. You don't have the printed off list, obviously, but the words are there. And then the exit slips, of course, will be due. There were 4 exits this week. So poetry is one thing you're working on. So today I'm going to go through imagery lesson. Then you will take the imagery exit slip. Now there is also an extra assignment for this week. It's called Same Song. I do this assignment every year. It's a good poem. You're going to read the poem and annotate it, and then answer the multiple choice questions. But we'll get to that here in a second. So let's go through imagery. Now, I like to, while we're doing this, show some poetry slams because I think that it gives you a basis, sort of when you recite your poem, what you would like to do. I want you to pay attention to things like volume. Are they loud enough? Are they clear? Do they have hand gestures, etc.? So I always start with this one. It's called Knock. It's one of the better poetry slams I've seen.
As a boy, I shared a game with my father. Played it every morning till I was 3. He would knock on my door and I'd pretend to be asleep till he got right next to the bed. Then I would get up and jump into his arms. Good morning, Papa. And my papa, he would tell me that he loved me. We shared a game, knock, knock, until that day when the knock never came. And my mama takes me on a ride past cornfields on this never-ending highway till we reach a place of high, rusty gates. A confused little boy, I enter the building carried in my mama's arms. Knock, knock. We reach a room of windows and brown faces. Behind one of the windows sits my father. I jump out of my mama's arms and run joyously towards my papa's, only by this window. I knock, knock, trying to break through the glass, trying to get to my father. I knock, knock as my mama pulls me away before my papa even says a word. And for years, he has never said a word. And so 25 years later, I write these words for the little boy in me who still awaits his papa's knock. Papa, come home because I miss you. Miss you waking me up in the morning and telling me you love me. Papa, come home because I don't know, and I thought maybe you could teach me how to shave, how to dribble a ball, how to talk to a lady, how to walk like a man. Papa, come home because I decided a while back I want to be just like you. But I'm forgetting who you are. 25 years later, a little boy cries, and so I write, try to heal and try to father myself, and I father who says the words my father did not, dear son. I'm sorry I never came home. For every lesson I failed to teach, hear these words. Shave in one direction with strong, deliberate strokes to avoid irritation. Dribble of your ballpoint pen. Walk like a god, and your goddess will come to you. No longer will I be your doors. You must learn to knock for yourself. Knock, knock down doors of racism and poverty that I could not. Knock, knock on doors of opportunity for the lost brilliance of the black men who crowd these cells. Knock, knock with diligence for the sake of your children. Knock, knock for me, for as long as you are free, these prison gates cannot contain my spirit. The best of me in you. Knock, knock with the knowledge that you are my son, but you are not my choices. Yes, we are our father's sons and daughters, but we are not their choices. But despite their actions, we are still here, still breathing, with the power to change this world, one little boy and girl at a time. Knock, knock, who's there? We are.
Alrighty, so notice definitely incredible volume. There's not really any time where you can't hear him. Maybe sometimes he goes a little bit too fast whenever it's sort of getting more emotional. So maybe, yeah, but other than that, not many complaints. He does have hand gestures. He is extremely well prepared to be able to recite that in such a way. So this is an example of a very good poetry slam. So let's start talking about our poetry terms. The first one is theme. Every poem is going to have a theme of some sort. It's a lesson, the central idea inside about human life, right? Like, what do humans take away? Theme is not a one-word answer. Like, you wouldn't say the theme of this is perseverance. That's the topic. What's it saying about perseverance? Is it telling you never give up? Is it telling you that even in the midst of struggle, you always have people you can rely upon, etc.? So theme is not a one-word answer. Now, an image is a description of anything we can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell. Notice those are our five senses. Like the image of a spaniel's floppy ears, for example, appeals to the sense of sight and touch, right? Like you can almost feel that, you can see it. Whenever you identify an image in a poem, that's what you'll want to do, is say which of the five senses, could be a couple, that it's mostly appealing to. Imagery, then, is language that appeals to one or more of the senses and creates images or pictures in our minds. So it's imagery whenever the author is like literally trying to paint a picture for you. Now, if you think of a stroll on a summer night, for instance, right? If I'm going to describe that, if I want to appeal towards sight, I might say a full moon and a black sky, right? Bring out those colors. I could even be more vibrant with it. For sound, what can you hear? Maybe the chirp of crickets. For taste, that maybe the tang of a cold glass of lemonade while you're walking. For touch, right? You might feel the warm breeze as it hits you. For smell, maybe freshly mowed grass. So notice I can just say, oh, we went on a stroll on a summer night, or I can use imagery to really paint the picture for you. So I want you to think of, what would your ideal perfect Saturday morning be, right? Like, what would you see? What do you hear? What do you taste? What do you touch? What do you smell? So you might take a second, pause, and do that. All right. Now I want you to compare that to, say I told you to describe Monday morning, right? Like, I'm sure that it's a much different sort of imagery that you're going to be using to describe that, unless you're a Monday person. So the main thing with imagery is, and we'll see, I'm going to show you our poems here in a second, that it's just language appealing to the senses, and usually it's going to appeal to a certain sense. So notice your homework, and this is going to be due on Thursday, April 16th. Same song, and you're going to annotate the poem and answer the 10 multiple choice questions. So as you annotate, notice it says you want to include, you're going to highlight words that appeal to a sense and add a comment identifying the sense. So say you see the Aztec blue shadow, right? Highlight that, and then off to the side, click add comment, and you would type in sight, etc. So you want to highlight all the words that you feel like really identify the senses. literary allusion in the poem and add a comment identifying what it alludes to. I will tell you the allusion is around there. Underline any, and that's a treat for actually watching the video. Underline any significant lines and add a comment explaining why the line is important. Add a comment about the theme or lesson. So at the end, you would add a comment saying what you think the lesson of this poem is. And then explain the title. So after you read, you're going to go back, you're going to add a comment to the title explaining why it's called Same Song. Then you're going to click on that link to answer 10 about the poem. Okay? But let's get to today's poems. So it's called Many Storied House by George L. Aline. Now you'll notice that there is, of course, a play on words here, right? It's a many-storied house. It's multiple floors, but also there are many stories within it that it holds, right? Like stories of what's happened there. She basically is going through and ruminating on what all she remembers from her childhood. So sorry, let me get this to one page. And she actually goes through different parts of the house, right? Like she starts downstairs, etc., and goes through it all. So she's taking us on sort of memory lane about her house and her stories. So it starts off with Provenance. Now, provenance, the word, means it's the place of origin or earliest known history of something. And sort of like, you go through who has owned it, etc. So she starts off, here I stand at the beginning with more questions than answers. Now, it's really interesting to me that she doesn't ask any of those questions, right? She just stands there waiting to try to learn from her reflection of this house. And there's a picture of it. What I know is Papa built the house I grew up in at Rio Vista, which is down below Loyal, 4 miles from Harlan, the county seat. It's on 1st Street, 108. I found out when we sold it. 4th house on the right, 2-story, reddish brown and white. You can't miss it. So notice we do start to get some site imagery here, reddish brown and white. But so this is a house from her childhood home, and they're selling it. So she's going through the memories of the house. So here's the downstairs. It's got a couple porches, right? This is probably the front of the house. So you got the hall, closet, bath as you come in. Then you have a hall, the kitchen, stairwells. They actually had a new room, and we'll see why. You had the kitchen, dining room, and living room. So it's going to start off with just the door, right? We passed, will pass, are passing through. Threshold of our holding, lintel of embraces, portal of goodbyes. Our DNA clasping your handle. So that's right. We got the past, the present, the future. This house has always been a part of them and always will be. The threshold of our threshing, holding, and so the door holds for them where they embraced, the places where they said goodbye, etc. And I like this, our DNA clasping your handle, because that will sort of always be there. So then it goes to the bathroom. So this is the window they put a kid through and they lock their keys in the house. You all might have a room in your house that, if you ever get locked out, they always go through a certain window. It was my brother till he got too big, right? They would pick the brother up. Then my wiry cousin David. Then me. No screen or storm window. So once they haul up the sash, somebody, not daddy because of his back. So notice we get an early indication that something's wrong with the dad's back. Puts hands on both sides of your waist and lifts you straight up like a post hole digger. Then eases you through the slot. Your task is to find the linoleum with your kids. Steady yourself, go out the bathroom door, avoiding the scary faces in the varnished pine. Notice this sight imagery here, right? Avoiding the scary faces in the varnished pine. So you can sort of picture that, just the woodwork on the wall. Maybe it had faces in it and it scared her. Step into the hall, turn the latch left. That's toward the train track. And let your keepers back in the zoo. So we're still downstairs at sort of the entry point. Closet. Just so this is the hall closet. Just inside the door, a closet to your left holds umbrella stand, folding chairs, coat rack, and amiable shelf for games and puzzles. Unlike ones in the rest of the house, these games have directions. A board so you can see where you are, written rules saying when they're over, right? And that sort of shows you what life is like. Life is very much unlike a board game in a structured sense. There's no directions, there's no board to tell you when it's finished, it's very random, etc. Likewise, the puzzles have pictures on top, so you know where the edges are and what scene you are trying to fit together. So as she writes this, it would almost be nice to have a jigsaw puzzle to sort of guide her, but she doesn't have that. And in life, many times that would happen. So notice the theme of this, that life is not as structured as a jigsaw, or as guiding as a jigsaw puzzle or a board game. Passage. This is one of my absolute all-time favorite poems that I've ever read. So this is talking about um, the passageway there and the door. It says, "The morning Daddy was leaving for the surgery that would not save him." So notice, the morning he left for surgery from which he would die. The doorbell rang, and he opened to a jaunty man on the front porch, a familiar cadger who never paid back a loan. Right, this guy had borrowed money from their family and never paid it back. Tired of lies, Daddy refused, and both men turned away. But a hinge in his heart turned Daddy back. "I'll give it to you," he said. It was the last thing the world asked of him, and he gave. So notice, obviously a very giving father. He didn't want to help that guy because the guy's lied to him so much. But that hinge in his heart turned him around, and one of his final acts on this earth was to give to others. So think of those themes that are developed from that. That chair. So this is a very interesting poem. It's definitely got some imagery in it. So she almost died in that wingback chair by the living room window. So a wingback chair is just a type of chair that it sort of looks like it has angel's wings on it. We had eaten at Mount Air up on Pine Mountain. A Sunday in September it was, when pain began to twist her heart as we whip stitched those switchback curves coming down. So they've gone to the mountain there on the way back, and the grandmother obviously is having some pain. But she said nothing. This was an anniversary celebration for my other grandparents. So this is one of her grandparents, but the others are celebrating their anniversary. She don't want to intrude, so she just keeps quiet. She said nothing when the car drew up to the house, just got out, traveled driveway and steps, threshold and hall, walked across the living room to that chair. Then it was obvious, sweat pouring off her, face all the wrong color, her eyes blank. Someone ran for Flora, our neighbor. A nurse who sent my mother for the bottle of ammonia under the sink. She twisted the cap off, then held Granny Booby's head, forcing her, if she was breathing, to breathe that jolt. So they're trying to save her. They're giving her the ammonia. After the ambulance and my parents left, Flora told me my grandmother's corset, which bound her middle tight as roads, bound that mountain, was the other savior. It kept enough blood in her heart, Flora said. If it had pulled in her feet, she'd be gone. I think of this when I sit in that chair my grandmother didn't die in. No wings on her back that day. So this is just, a story of her grandmother almost died, and somehow the corset she was wearing saved her. And she just happened to be sitting in that wingback chair, and then the pun on, no wings on her back that day. Art. This is a fun one. When Daddy got the hi-fi, which replaced the Crosley radio just inside the living room door, it came with the demonstration record to show what rich, lifelike sound Magnavox could bring into your home. Our neighborhood was bound by mountain, river, railroad. Coal trains whistled, rattling our walls day and night. Notice the sound imagery we've got going on. But when Daddy turned on that hi-fi and the needle rode the black platter, we called the neighbors. You've got to come hear this, we said, thrilled at the woohoo and hiss and roar of a real train so close. So it's funny that they, of course, get this new technology that makes you hear rich, lifelike sound, and they live near a train, right? Like they hear trains all the time, but when they hear it on that stereo, they run and get all the neighbors to come hear what a train sounds like. But also, there probably is a difference between the real train and maybe the coal trains that they hear. Um, so again, Eastern Kentucky, Appalachia, coal mines, etc. Visitor, that man, that shining man, grackle black hair. Notice that very distinct sight imagery. Bedazzling eyes, a voice like effervescent velvet. Notice that touch, which is funny because it's also related to sound. Like his voice sounds like velvet. Sitting on the rose couch, strumming a guitar. A guitar, because they probably mainly had other instruments or couldn't afford a guitar, and singing. Once a jolly swag man camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree, his Australian mouth kissing strange words into song. Why, he was an adult and alive, happy as a kid, I could tell, with my 10-year-old knowing, and this was sweeter than the blackberry cobbler, notice that taste, mother had served in his honor. Right there that night, Desmond Tees waltzed my sky with a whole new Matilda of stars. This poem is very interesting for all the imagery that sort of, you get sound mixed in with sight, sound mixed in with touch, etc. Showing you the power of music and how music can affect all the senses. Money laundering. This is a funny story. So, because Daddy's dry cleaners had been broken into and the safe busted up to get the day's take, which was less than the cost of repairing the safe and the door, Daddy took to bringing the money back home and leaving the safe open. So, he didn't want to replace the safe, so he just brings the money home every night. Because we didn't have a safe at home and because that seemed a stupid place to keep money anyway, because it just got broken into, Daddy put it in the washer. So he just would put the money in the washing machine. So eventually it got washed, right? Of course. Bills and coins and checks dancing around the agitator in the bag, of course, going into spin. And because you cannot tender wet cash at the bank, Daddy laid it all out on the dining room table to dry. Right? So the money got washed and it's got to dry out. So neighbors dropped in for an evening cup of coffee served in the living room with apple pie and a clear view of that table. So notice we got the taste imagery here with its banquet of Jackson, Lincoln, Washington, Jefferson laid out. So they've got all this silent word went through the family, pretend it's not there. And silent signals slipped from guest to guest. Do you see what I see? Do you think they printed in the basement? I swear it doesn't even look dry. So they think that the family's doing a counterfeit money operation, when really they're just laundering the money, but not in the sense. They literally laundered the money. Oh my. So the house inside our house is a gingerbread house, and it is on the dining room table. So she's recollecting as a child gingerbread house with her family, which is something that probably a lot of us have done. There is no house inside the gingerbread house, probably, but you don't know. You can't see in the gingerbread windows outlined in icing with sugar wafer shutters, so you don't know, do you, that there aren't gingerbread people in there who have made a miniature version of this house you are standing in on whatever gingerbread people eat, which surely is not gingerbread. Perhaps they bake little boards, melt sugar into glass windows, cut chewy shingles out of licorice with a paring knife. And if this is true, then it wasn't a dream. That raisin eye, huge and puckered, that I saw peering yesterday morning to see if we exist. So she had a dream where she saw a raisin eye, it says, peering in through the window, and she sort of thinks of how they're building a gingerbread house and maybe someone else is using our houses as gingerbread houses, etc. So, just some childhood thoughts. Ritual. Home from work, Daddy shucks the leather sheathed back brace that straps down his pain so he can stand. He rolls dented shoulders, rests the brace against the china cabinet. So the dad obviously does something that he has to wear a back brace for, and he loves when he comes home and gets to take it off. Um, So it just goes through that ritual, right? Like he does this daily. What's the symbolism behind it? What all is he carrying? What burdens, etc. Collector's item. And we're almost done, just a couple more poems. On the cornice board above the window is a large plate painted with a brown and amber pheasant against a jade and spring green ground. Notice that sight imagery. It belonged to Ella Ezel Lane Coolwell, my mother's mother's. Notice she doesn't just say my great grandmother, she says my mother's mother's mother, sort of to bring in that it's a long line of women. The woman who was kind to her, the woman who, widowed with 3 small children, started a boarding house, married a boarder, made it to Memphis from the dirt roads of Prescott, still unpaved in 1972. I know my great grandmother from one picture, delectable descriptions of her salmon salad, her bold signature, and a second edition of Swinburne, this great place, and the way her hand, calm at the small of my mother's back, steadied us. So this is just, a poem about what is the collector's item. Is it this painting that her great grandmother owned, or is it all this other stuff, right? Is it her great grandmother herself? Is that the valuable thing? Phone. This is where she stood when she took the call that November morning. So notice these have been sort of childlike, right? Like this is going to be more and more recent. Mother, I said from my hospital bed, the baby is here. Who is this? She asked, an edge to her voice. Mother, it's me. I've had the baby. Who? Who did you say is calling? Your daughter, Joey. He was born early this morning. So notice the author calls her mother to tell her that she's had a son. She's had her baby. All right, I have to go. Your daddy's not doing well at all. So that's the mother's response. You can imagine what effect that response must have had on her. Notice out of all the possible phone conversations she can include here, this is the one she does. So notice how she's writing this. She's just sort of walking around like she sees the table, she sees the china cabinet, she sees the painting, she sees the phone. She's just walking around and seeing things. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to take things as a starting point to spark a memory to write about. Um, August 4th, 1944. This is the last one we'll read today. It's Dining Room. Don't pay attention to this one. This is a very cool a very cool poem. So it says, my brother turns to talking a blue streak. Hot as it is, mother bakes a cake, invites the grandparents down. First, there's spaghetti, which the toddler eats delicately by fistfuls. Notice, I'm sure that oxymoron. Then the shiny chocolate temple of cake. Notice the sight, the taste. Everyone crowds around singing to the future. Happy birthday to you, right? So on her brother's birthday on August 4th, 1944, he's celebrating his second birthday. They have a party and they celebrate. But notice this parallel she brings up. I love how this poem is structured. To the future, they have pledged themselves. 8 people hiding on the other side of the world. If you know anything about history, if you're remembering back to what you read in the 8th grade, who these 8 people are, then this day the bookcase is swung back, stairway revealed. With shouts and shoves, they are herded out at gunpoint. All but one will fall to the final solution. But the Gestapo won't find the teenage girl's birthday gift. A red and white checked diary. The world will find that. This is a very sombering poem, right? It brings up that on this date, while her family was celebrating her brother's birthday, just across the world, Anne Frank and her family were discovered. They were brought out at gunpoint, sent off to where all but one of them would die. But notice her birthday gift, right? That diary that has become so well read, the world would find that. So this is a very interesting structure for a poem to bring up that, here we have what was happening on this day in our house, but then here's what was happening around the world. So that would be a very cool structure to emulate when you go to write your poems. So that's all the poems for today. I will give more. I'll post the full poetry um, project assignment at a late hopefully today, but that's imagery. So just think about that, the different images that we appeal to, and we will talk more tomorrow.